But there's plenty of issues beyond that on the local level and on the state level that are in relation to COVID-19 and in relation to all the other big stories that are still in play as 2020 continues, including the upcoming election. And joining us now to talk about a number of those issues is State Representative Mari Manoogian from Michigan's 40th District on the Oakland County Megacast. Mari, thank you for being with us again.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate having you on. Since we last spoke, how have you been? How's your team doing?
Oh, everything's okay. It's been the challenge that our folks are feeling in the district. We're feeling here too. I think everyone's getting a little restless, and especially with it being so hot out, it's hard to spend time outside for longer periods of time.
Yeah, it's definitely continued to be an interesting challenge for our state as we've experienced a bit of a spike as of late, and adjustments had to be made. There was a goal initially from the governor, or previously from the governor, to bring the state into Phase 5 by the 4th of July. Of course, that was pushed back after some incidents throughout the state, and then an increase in case numbers and so on. And so we're still in Phase 4. From your knowledge at the state level, have there been any discussions about how we're going to continue to progress forward in the Michigan Safe Start plan if we're at a good pace, and what more maybe can be done at the state level to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in Michigan?
Those are great questions, and I wish I could give you more insight into what it looks like in terms of timing for moving to different phases, but this is the deal. So we, have seen some major spikes in cases. Folks who are, gathering in large gatherings without wearing face masks, etc. 4th of July weekend, a lot of families, spent time together, and we wish we could do that in a way that, was similar to how we were doing it pre-COVID. But the reality here is that, as time has worn on, we have seen an increase in cases. And so the governor's team is, working with epidemiologists and physicians and folks who are on the ground who understand the spread of the disease better than I do as someone who's not really from that field. And that's where those decisions are being made. And so, I completely trust the folks who are telling us to trust the science because, as we've seen in other states, when, we looked at things here in Michigan, and I think, all of us can sort of say that, I think many people thought that this was pretty strict, the way that things were going here in the early part of spring. But you can look at the data and see that Michigan was a leader in preventing the spread of COVID-19. And so it's on all of us to really step up and make sure we're wearing masks, and that, frankly, the way that I've been operating is that I don't have to be out of my home, or if I'm, out doing something outside in my neighborhood or whatever it is, walking around, I will do it as less frequently as I did before COVID-19, trying to stay away from people that, are not in my dwelling, and just making sure that we're just more careful about who we're coming in contact with, and trying not to go out and in ways that we were pre-COVID.
So you're in the middle of your first term. How has this been for you to be a part of this process and then having to shift and do a lot of this remotely?
Yeah, so I will say that no one, including people who were in their second or third term, really saw this coming. So this is a very, a very unique situation for all of us, especially at the state level. And so, we're used to being together in Lansing often. A lot of the bills that we were working on that didn't have to do with this public health crisis really ground to a halt. We were doing a lot of work on criminal justice reform. We've been doing a lot of work on workers' rights and different issues like that that are definitely important. But right now, the pressing issues are dealing with COVID and making sure that anytime there's any federal appropriation that comes down to the state, that we're able to appropriate that money properly and in a timely fashion. That we're making sure that we can use that money for our first responders, our frontline workers, and our schools, all of that stuff. So it's been a challenge. Committee meetings have been, everyone's been masked if we're in committee meetings. And those conversations are, a little bit tougher. A lot of my job has to do with, frankly, building trust and being able to read people's body language. And when you're wearing a mask, it's really hard to do that.
Mari Manoogian with us. She is the state representative from Michigan's 40th district with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Mari, we're entering into an election season. The primary election, of course, is upcoming on August 4th next week, and then the general election, of course, in November. And we're in a year now because of the Proposal 3 in 2018 that allows for no reason absentee voting, and especially given the circumstances of COVID-19, there's definitely been a significant influx of people that have registered to vote absentee and will be voting absentee, but there are strict deadlines in place also that require these ballots to be into their local clerks by the time that polls close on election day. So anything being done at the state level, maybe for support for these local clerks or for these absentee voters to ensure that we're not limiting these absentee voters' rights as they're submitting their ballots, many by mail, when the United States Postal Service is experiencing such significant delays.
That's really appreciate the question, because myself and a bunch of my colleagues have actually introduced legislation to help our local clerks during this really difficult time. One of the things that I'll start at the top of this. Folks often forget that you actually have to put 2 stamps on your ballot in order to get it to make its way back to the clerk's office. But I actually, just yesterday, Oakland County announced that they will be covering all postage for all absentee ballots cast in the county for the November election. So forgetting about putting a stamp on your ballot shouldn't be an issue if you live in Oakland County in the 2020 presidential and November elections, because the county is going to take care of that for all absentee voters. The thing that we introduced, the bill that we introduced in my office, specifically had to do with not absentee voters, but the question of when you could move a polling location during a state of emergency. Some of our local clerks just need, as you mentioned, sort of tools in the toolkit. For us, we saw flexibility as one of those really important tools, understanding that there are certain, as you said, certain deadlines for when a ballot can make its way back to a clerk's office. There's also certain parameters for when a clerk can move a polling location. And so we wanted to make sure that especially during a state of emergency, that those clerks have an opportunity to make some best judgment calls for their community.
Mari Manoogian with us. She is the state representative from Michigan's 40th district with us on the Oakland County Megacast. In addition to the issues at the election, going back to the COVID-19 response, in recent weeks, especially as we had the new mask order go into effect, Governor Gretchen Whitmer had come under some fire for the use of the emergency alert system to announce this new rule, including some legislators at the state level who were wanting to introduce legislation to limit the use of the emergency alert system to very specific emergency uses. Your thoughts on that situation? Was the governor right to use the emergency alert system at the state level to announce the new mask order? Was that maybe an overstep on her level? And what are your thoughts on this legislation potentially being introduced to limit the use of the emergency alert system?
I'm just going to be real honest about this. I think this is silly political posturing, just another opportunity for folks who don't actually want to come to the table with real solutions to jab the governor over something that was so important to get that message out to all Michiganders. I just don't see, I cannot for the life of me understand why this has become such a political issue. And why we're taking every opportunity to try to rib her and discredit the work that she's done to keep our state safe. There is an executive order in place that mandates that you have to wear a mask. That is what this is. And executive orders during states of emergency are carried out as law. And so for the governor to inform her citizens of her state that a new law has been put in place that is very important. To me, I don't understand what the reasoning behind this was, other than to be political. It's very frustrating to me as someone that sees this as a public health issue and not a political issue. It's frustrating to my constituents, where in the state of Michigan, huge majorities of people understand this and understand the importance of mask wearing. Our businesses, who are wonderful and are doing everything they can to keep their doors open, having to now worry about people getting into altercations because they've chosen not to wear a mask and chosen to break the law, doesn't make much sense to me. And so, I'll just reiterate this, that to me, it really does bother me that this was sort of some silly political posturing and just an opportunity for someone to catch a headline.
You have a lot of prominent businesses in the area that you represent. Let's go into a little bit further about the mask mandate. Should it be up to the employees to enforce the mask wearing for the patrons of these businesses?
So here's what I think. Our local police department in Birmingham has already said that they will be enforcing this mask mandate. And if folks see an issue, if there's a persistent, pervasive issue with regard to wearing masks in an establishment, and I'm thinking very specifically in places where people are eating and drinking, places where people could be in very close quarters, if the storefront is a very small space. I like to shop at a local bakery. It's very, very tiny. I think you could maybe comfortably, with 6 feet distancing, maybe fit 5 people in that entire bakery. I would have a problem personally if I looked through the window and saw that people were not wearing masks. I would not want to patronize that place. And so I can see where, if there is a consistent issue with mask wearing, that an employee or someone who's a patron in that store or in that local business would call in, not to the emergency line, of course, but sort of flag for folks that this is a place that there's a consistent issue with following the letter of the executive order.
So are you saying it would be up to the employees to call the police department, or or should the employees address it with the patron coming into the business?
So again, I think that this is a judgment call. If it is an issue we've seen through a few different counties that there have been some very serious physical altercations that have happened between employees and folks who are refusing to comply with the executive order. And that if you feel that you are being put into a position that you are physically being threatened, and as an employee, you have the right to not be physically threatened by someone who comes into your storefront. If that is the case, then yes. I think that if you're an employee, I don't really see a personal issue with politely reminding folks, hey, this store is complying with the executive order and we ask that you wear a mask. And if you can't do that, we may have to have another conversation. And if it goes further than that, then of course the authorities should probably be alerted. We've seen in a few other counties, including Eaton County most recently, that unfortunately it turned into a fatal situation. And I don't understand why this is happening in such a way.
Just to ask one more question on this topic and then we'll move on, but there seems to be a lot of confusion, myself included, about if someone says they have a health reason for not wearing a mask, are you allowed to ask them to show you why or tell you why, or is it okay for an employee or a business to take that at face value? Or is it a violation of HIPAA rules and the American with Disabilities Act to ask them?
Right. You're absolutely right. If someone says that it is that they have medical reasoning for not wearing one, then asking for proof is not covered in the executive order.
Okay, thank you. So it's just been one of those topics, and we're starting to see online where you can get a placard or something it's almost like a card to carry with you that says, I don't have to wear a mask for medical reasons, but there really is no, it's not issued from a doctor. So do you think that's something that should maybe be addressed in the executive order, that people could go to their doctor to get something official so that it would make it a little bit more comfortable for people and clarify the issue on both sides?
So this is the thing. Going further into an executive order, you can look at the FAQs on the coronavirus website here, and you can see very clearly if you are concerned about an issue about mask wearing or any of the other executive orders, you can look it up and it clearly states what that. I guess I'm just trying to understand why there's confusion around this. I think that I don't think that there should be any confusion given the fact that there is an executive order. And then, of course, that's in legalese. So I can understand where someone may not completely understand what that's saying. But there are FAQs that are attached to every single one of those executive orders. So, for me, I guess we could maybe see a little bit more clarification in those FAQs at times early on. I asked for clarification as well. But with regard to the mask order, there isn't really any there really isn't any reason to not trust that FAQ document is very complete.
If we could shift focus real quickly, you are the youngest woman serving right now in the legislature, and we have seen so many protests going on with so many young people. What advice would you give to them to take their protest from just on the streets to trying to help get policy changed?
So a couple of things. I've spoken at some of these protests, and that's exactly what I addressed. The first thing I said was make sure people are registered to vote. Make sure your friends are registered to vote. In 2018, and I was 26 when I was elected, one of my girlfriends from figure skating from many years ago, she'd never voted before. I taught her how to register to vote. I helped make sure she cast her ballot in the primary, helped her make sure she cast a ballot in the general. I didn't push her to vote in any one particular direction, but I just wanted to make sure she'd never voted before. She'd never seen what a ballot looked like before. It's really, really important, especially during these times when we're not. Maybe we won't see full groups of students on college campuses in the fall, and typically in the fall is when a lot of voter registration happens. Especially now that you can register up to the day that you can cast your ballot here in Michigan. Making sure that folks are registered to vote and understand how to vote is really, really important. And so for young people who are in the street, that's what I said to them was, look, it cannot stop here. If you want to see real change happen, you need to make sure you take people to the ballot box and make sure you're voting for people who comply with your values and who are with you on your values.
Mari, anything else before we let you go today?
That's it. Thanks, guys.
We appreciate having you on. Representative Mari Manoogian from the state's 40th district with us on the Oakland County MegaCast.